One of the toughest challenges in photography is when you have a big difference in lighting from one part of the subject to another. Now, this often happens when you're standing in the shade taking a picture towards sunlight, or taking a picture from a brightly lit area into a darker one. When photographing people, you often have situations where one part of their face or body is darker than another. This tutorial will show you how to use Photoshop's Camera Raw filter to overcome this problem. Whether you use a Mac or a PC, you can learn to use this technique. It would be great if you could always adjust the lighting before taking the picture, but in many cases you either don't have the equipment or there's no time to set it all up. You can use your shutter speed, f-stop, and ISO setting to help, but invariably you must fix these exposure problems in post-processing. Until recently, that meant using a program like Photoshop, and the process was kind of daunting. First, you had to tediously select the offending part of the image. Then, you had to use layers or masks and do adjustments on individual parts of the photo. But since Photoshop now includes the Camera Raw filter, it's much easier and more intuitive to adjust for these problems. The Camera Raw filter has been in Photoshop since 2013, but many people are understandably a little afraid of the filters in Photoshop. And to be honest, you wouldn't normally think of using a filter to correct image problems. Instead, you'd think they were to manipulate photos or to make art out of them. But that's not always the case, as you'll soon see. And don't be concerned if your camera doesn't shoot photos in RAW, or if you don't have files in the RAW file format. You can load a wide range of photo types into Photoshop's Camera Raw filter and use it to improve many aspects of your photos.
Open your photo in Photoshop. You could drag it into the workspace or just select File, Open, and then choose the photo you want. It was a cool autumn afternoon when I hiked along this stream and happened upon this scene. The afternoon light was hiding details along the banks, but the water was exquisitely clear. There was the unforgettable smell of leaves giving up their summer's vibrance, and there wasn't a sound, except for the lilting water and leaves softly rustling in the breeze. I wanted to capture the moment so I could go back there again and again without having to actually go back there. I took a few pictures of the scene, bracketing as I went to get a variety of exposures. This exposure was somewhere in the middle, and so it's a good candidate for using the Camera Raw filter to bring out the details hidden in the underexposed portions. Now, the very next thing you should do after opening the photo is to duplicate it by clicking and dragging it to this icon on the lower right side of the workspace. Then get into good habits by renaming the layers to something that's meaningful to you. I'm used to the working layer being called Layer 0, so that's fine with me, but you should use whatever name is most meaningful for you. Next, set up your active layer to use Smart Filters. Click OK and then select Camera Raw Filter from the Filter drop-down. Now, I have previously cropped this picture, so in the Camera Raw workspace I'll see a grayed area where I cropped. If you have previously straightened a picture, you'll see those cropped areas too. Don't worry, they'll be gone again when you exit Camera Raw. Notice all the sliders. You have an amazing variety of adjustments with the Camera Raw filter, and that's why many people who learn how to use it find they do much of their photo editing with it. Next, observe what happens when you click the Auto button. Notice the details in the image that you couldn't see before. Now, the result might be fine for many people, and you could stop right there and be done with it. But for me, Auto left it too overexposed. Remember, I had been there, and I remembered what the scene felt like. It was darker feeling and more peaceful than the feeling you get from harsh lighting. So I decided to click the default button so I could do my own adjustments. And this is where the real magic begins. So instead of using Auto, I'm going to use the adjustment brush to selectively expose different parts of the scene. Because I'm going to increase exposure to bring out details, I'll slide the exposure slider to the right. Now, if I'd wanted to tone down an area, make it darker, then I'd move the slider to the left. Next, I click in an area I want to affect, hold down the mouse button, and start brushing in more light. You can see as I move the brush over the scene, it is bringing out details. As you use the brush, you should pay close attention to the highlights and shadows. In this case, I want to lighten the shadows, so I should avoid running the brush on parts of the picture that aren't shadows. But even if I drift into those places and they start to become too light, it's not a big deal. I can just hold down Control in Windows or Command in Mac and press Z button to get back to the previous state. Then I can start that particular operation over without going all the way back to when I started using the brush. So I'm liking how this is coming out, and I'm just going to speed up the action so you can see the various areas I work on without getting totally bored. As you use the brush, you should do some forethought about the area's current exposure and the exposure you want to achieve. That's because you can use multiple instances of the brush. So you might have to heavily increase the exposure in one part of the picture, but not so much in another. By using new brushes for each area, you can gain a lot of control over your results. And I'll show you that now because I like the area on the right side of the picture to stay darker than the area I've been working on. It's in the distance, and since the light is coming from the right, it wouldn't naturally penetrate into the canyon as much as it would on the left. So I want the right side to stay darker than the left. I choose New from the Adjustment Brush menu and move the exposure slider more to the left. Then I start brushing that area. Notice the red dot on the right and the white dot on the left. Each dot represents a brush. And if you want to switch from one brush to the next, you can just click the dot.
Let's say I'm working on the right side of the picture and I see a spot on the left where I want to increase the exposure. I can click on the white dot, do my brushing, and then quickly get back to the other exposure setting by clicking on the previous dot I was using.
One more important thing to know is that whatever exposure you have set for a particular brush, it is adjustable as long as the dot is showing. So even after you finish using a brush, you can use the slider to fine-tune the exposure. Just click the dot and use the slider. And all the other sliders are also available to you to further adjust the area where you brushed. In this case, I'm going to adjust the blacks to make them lighter. Now there's one thing more I want to do with this picture. I'd like the sky to have some blue, well, at least more blue than it currently has. And the graduated filter that sits up beside the adjustment brush is an excellent tool for working with large areas of images. Once you activate it, you adjust the slider or sliders representing the changes you want to make. Then click and drag to select an area. In this case, I want to reduce the exposure of the sky to bring out more color. Then, once the space is selected, I move the sliders to adjust that aspect of the photo as I observe the changes. In this case, I also want to cool down the sky to bring out more blue. Other sliders that might help with skies include the saturation, dehaze, and clarity adjustments. But I'm okay with this as it is, so I'll click OK and return to the main editing window. You can click the eyeballs next to each layer to turn their visibility on and off. It's a good way to observe the changes you made from the original to the edited version. In this case, my changes have all been pretty subtle. But I see there's a small sliver of previous cropping showing on the right side of the picture. So I'll click the crop tool icon and take care of that. When you crop, it's also a good time to enhance composition. In this case, I wanted to get rid of some of the distractions on the right to make the waterway a greater focal point. Finally, it's time to save the work in a format that's widely readable. If you just hit the Save button in the File menu, the item will save as a PSD. And you should do that so that if you ever want to make additional changes, you can do it easily and quickly without having to repeat previous actions you did. But now it's time to save the image as a JPG, and to get a good range of options, we'll use the Export command. Choose Export, Export As, and use the drop-down box to select the file type. In this case, I'm using JPG. You can also select the quality level, you can change the size, and in the Resample drop-down you have several options. For most cases like this, you'll select Preserve Details. You also have a chance to add metadata if you have it pre-populated in the program, and you can choose the color space, which for JPG is best left as RGB. Click the Export button, fill in the file name and destination, and you're done. Here are the original and the edited versions side by side. Starting at the left, you can see the details brought out by using Camera Raw. Like I said, this was a very light edit, so it's not strikingly different. For me, though, it improved my picture just enough without going so far as to change the overall feeling. And I suspect it's probably nice enough now to print and frame.
I hope this tutorial has at least given you a good introduction to the Camera Raw filter in Photoshop. I know once you start using it, it'll become your go-to tool when you have to make photo adjustments.